This week on This Would Know, we feature Sara Slagle, an accomplished producer, props designer, production designer, and chef. Sara is one of my favorite people in the world, and we are so excited to introduce her to you today on This Would Know.
I like that new intro format. It's kind of classy. But it's the kind of classy where you have to say it in like a Midwestern accent to sort of it's classy. I did not know that you and Monty have known each other for 10 years.
Yeah, I know. Although I will say I've seen you more this year than I have in all the 10 years we have known each other. Because we did Romeo and Juliet this year, and it was just like nice to cross paths.
Sara, would you mind letting folks know both our history and then like your trajectory in New York as a theater artist?
Once upon a time, worked at a very famous men's entertainment magazine, and then I didn't. I was unemployed, and I was just sort of bored. And I came across this listing for like a props designer on Craigslist for a theater company in the indie community called Boomerang Theater Company. And I was like, well, that could be cool. I kind of done stuff like that before because I'd worked on a few commercials like through friends. And I'm like, what's this about? And so my first theater project was 3 shows in rep, 3 very different shows. There was Much Ado About Nothing. There was a Tom Stoppard play. And there was a brand new piece of writing that I couldn't tell you the name. I don't remember the show at all. And then shortly after that, I kind of got involved with the Gallery Players, which is a community theater in Brooklyn. Long story short, I became their resident prop master. I met Monty at Summer Shakespeare Gallery doing Othello. He played Cassio. That was such an amazing production spiritually because I feel like everything just kind of mushed together so well and everyone was just like on the same page. If you haven't seen one of my shows or if you don't know, I guess for the lack of a better term would be called a method prop designer where
That is so accurate.
I'm so curious. What does this mean?
May I give one example?
Yes.
For a play set in the American Revolution with a lot of letters, hand making the paper for hundreds of letters and hand writing all of those letters so that everything in the box can be opened by an actor on stage so that they can follow their impulses. And the entire design is real, full, and made from scratch.
I just have this like insane need to completely immerse myself and the actors into the world which they're playing in.
I think that's so like
fantastic, to the point where at certain points I've been up all night typesetting tax forms from 1962 because I couldn't find them online. So I recopied them so that they could have the yeah, I do that. I will make 600 letters to fill a trunk that are all hand dip dyed and in calligraphy with real ink and wax seals.
And you do
so
this,
amazing.
And
they
you do this
amazing.
By yourself. There's not a team that does this with you.
I do not have a minion. No, it's all me.
Can I ask a question? Mm-hmm. When do you sleep?
Don't. I'm actually an android. And, to kind of like jump forward, I found this company called Retro Productions. They do a very specific type of theater, which is 19th century plays only that are not commonly produced when you do one of their shows because everybody involved is right down to the minute detail where it's like you're actually living in this place at this time. And it's rewarding, but you also learn so much just about history, trying to decorate an apartment of a couple who's been in that apartment for 40 years and what that would look like. And it's just so much work that goes into that.
Your first job working in theater, running 3 shows in rep, were you working in properties on that show right from the get-go?
Yeah, and it was just me, and I had no idea what I was doing. I was just like, fake it till you make it, girl. I wanted to do something. I was unemployed. I was sort of like down and out. I was like, I don't know what to do now. I just need a break from like, I did graphic design, marketing, and advertising, and that burnt me out in one way. And I needed to expel those creative juices into another channel, and that's what I kind of stumbled upon. Had
you worked in theater before, or was that?
I mean, in high school here and there, doing scenic painting, stuff like that. Not too much. I tried to act for a while. That didn't work out. The whole stage fright thing.
Was the theater that you worked with your first time out, did they sort of train you in this method of like method prop making and prop mastery, or was this just came from you somewhere?
That is just like, it came from me as an artist where I'm like, I need to make this as real as possible because the actors really like it. And it wasn't like I was trying to appease them, but I'm really into the idea of world building, and that is a huge part of it, as you have experienced. A lot of people don't realize how much work goes into props and like set decorating. It's just like an insane amount of work and research and shopping. I make a lot of things because not everything can be bought. And yeah, did I have to hand make my own paper for an Aaron Burr play? No, but I felt it was necessary.
I wasn't even involved in this play, but I immediately have a sense of approaching all of those different props with so much more respect and care when you know how much time and effort went into them, which, again, going back to your point, I feel like drops you into the world that much more, because if you know someone had to make this paper by hand and they had to make multiple copies of this paper by hand just so you can use it in specific moments in the show, you're going to treat that much differently than if someone just ran out and got a box of cardstock parchment from Office Depot.
You would hope. However, some actors.
No.
As I'm sure you can tell us, Sarah.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah. It happens.
Top of your mind, without naming names, biggest horror story from your perspective as a maker of these amazing world-building elements that an actor has done, so that every actor listening out there can make sure never, ever, ever to do this.
There has been on numerous occasions, I have gone out to find very specific glassware for a period show, and that glassware never makes it past the second show, even though I specifically told them it is irreplaceable. I don't remember the show. I remember it was a Shakespeare, where there was like a fake knife situation with blood. Somewhere mid-run, the fake knife had disappeared, and the inexperienced ASM at the time went and grabbed a steak knife.
No.
Yes.
No.
But
what?
here's, I know, that's like, so...
This was in New York.
This was in New York. This was a few years ago. I understand his intention, and it was not malicious in any way. He was just like, he didn't think about it.
Clearly.
But... thankfully, the actor noticed while in the middle of a scene. The actor...
he noticed while he was on stage.
And he just like kind of just faked it. And I hear this afterwards because I wasn't there. Yeah, that could have ended so badly.
So horrifically.
Yeah. So thank God that he was able to think on his feet.
Yeah, but also, again, actors, check your... vengeance! Props.
Thankfully, no one was hurt, nothing, but it's just like, that is just so irresponsible. And I know stuff like that has happened on Broadway, too. I think there was like a Sweeney Todd thing, right? Where like...
What?
Yeah.
Where they swapped out a prop knife for a real one?
Something had happened, and it was like the one that they slit the throat, and I remember hearing that story.
Sure, because that's a knife you can just afford to swap out on a whim. It's not like it's ever...
It's period. I mean, it's actually like a shame.
Oh my God.
I know, you hear these and you're just like, your heart drops. And you're just like, oh,
I need to go and take a nap
Yeah, no,
after hearing that.
I'm looking back on like production teams that I thought might have been a little bit less responsible, and now looking in horror at what could have possibly happened.
Oh
yeah,
my God.
Always check your props. Because even like on the indie level, there's a lot going on before a show, and they just like miss something, and that could be the one thing that's like really important.
When that happens, how do you handle that with the people who are on your team or other actors, et cetera, et cetera? How do you, I'm basically asking, how do you not fly off the handle?
I always try to follow professional protocol, which means after opening night, I'm not really allowed to talk to anyone unless it's like an emergency. So I'm only allowed to converse with the stage manager, and then he or she flows the information where it needs to go.
Mm-hmm. Well, I mean, in this instance, it seems to me like this would really be like the fight director is who should have been.
There wasn't one.
Well, there's the problem.
Yeah. In that specific instance, I broke protocol, and I went right over the stage manager's head, and I went straight to the director, who I had a good relationship with. Mm-hmm. So I felt like I could do that. If it was someone that I didn't really know that well, I probably would have stayed in my lane. That person was immediately terminated from the production. And I felt really bad, but that's just like, that's not something you can mess with, you know?
Well, I feel like this is one of the, like, I feel like this actually goes beyond the theater, right? When when that level of danger is introduced to a situation, I don't care if it's a prop knife being swapped out for a stage knife. I don't care if it's your drunk uncle at Thanksgiving slewing racial epithets. Once actual danger is introduced into the realm, like staying in your lane can in fact be selfish.
Yeah, it's like, when do you step in? And are you one of those like nosy people who always steps in? And it's hard to gauge nowadays.
I'm fascinated at, where do you start? Where do you like to start with your world building?
I go to the actors and I say, tell me about your character and what their background story is. So and it depends on the play, of course. I go to them and I ask them very specific questions. I was like, where does your character work? How long have you lived in this? Blah, blah, blah. And they're like, why are you asking me all this? And then they find out later that I give them all these props that are like super personal to their character. And it just like elevates that character to a new level that they probably never even realized, because I gave them physical objects. It's like visualizing what's in their mind as the background story on the set.
90% of professional theater, though, you're hired months before the actors are. What happens when they want to see design drafts from you and you don't get to meet the actors until you're on draft 4?
That's a good question. Because that's happened where there's been a few shows and they were off Broadway productions. So like I had to like follow the rules, and I am weird and I will go to rehearsals. If I can't talk to the actors, I'll show up at random rehearsals or ones that I feel like are important. And I watch and I listen. One of the interesting things about me as being extremely detailed is that I'm a keen observer. I always have been. I just notice everything. And yeah, I'll go to rehearsals and I'll just watch and I'll listen. I won't say a word. I probably won't talk to anyone. I just bring my notebook and I'm just like, okay, so that person does this with their hands. That means they're left-handed. And, that makes a difference when I give them a weathered briefcase that they would have carried in their left hand, and it's weathered perfectly like they had just been carrying it for 30 years, instead of one that was just bought from a store.
Do you see why Sarah works on every project that I do if I have any say in the matter?
100%.
So one of our Patreon supporters, Amber Elby, asked during the video live stream of this podcast recording, Sarah, do you have any food theater ghost stories? Oh, asterisk. Good. Ducking autocorrect.
So I don't subscribe to the label of ghost. I do believe that there is a veil between the living and the dead, and sometimes that veil is thin and sometimes it's not, but that's a different podcast. I've spent many a nights in a theater doing an all-nighter, because I do those. That's how this stuff happens. By myself in the dead of night, with the only person there. And yeah, I've heard things. I've seen shadows. Things have gone missing and then reappeared out of question. I had like these like cigarette props, and they had gone missing. I didn't know if someone had thought they were real cigarettes and tried to smoke them. And so it was like the cigarettes themselves plus the package that was vintage replicated. I searched everywhere in that theater. I searched a dressing room, backstage, front of house, in the house, everywhere. And at the end of the show, we just kind of had to like make do for the show because we're just running out of time. I found them in a box in a trunk that was locked under a prop table behind a curtain. And the thing is, no one knew that that trunk was there because I put it there. It was so freaky.
Whoa.
And I'm like, that's like some David Blaine stuff. Like, how did that even get in there? I actually didn't tell anyone about it because I didn't want to freak anyone out. I just said, oh, I found them. They were in the corner, because like the ASM did not have the combination to that prop trunk. And I know the other person that did have the combination didn't have time to deal with it.
That's how dangerous nicotine is, kids.
Yeah.
Even after you're dead, it will make you
Even
stay and haunt theaters.
Paper.
Take prop cigarettes. Don't start.
Because you'll never quit.
From that point on, when I'm in the when I first move into a space, like when we do tech, I go early and I will sage the space.
Really?
Yeah, I do that.
Right on.
I don't tell anyone about it because it doesn't hurt anyone.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't send anything away. I just said, from this point to this point, just let us be, and we won't bother you, and vice versa.
I always, if I'm in a traditional theater space, I will always find a time when I'm the only one in the space, as early in the process as possible, to walk every part of the audience, like every place that an audience's feet can be, and find some moment to put hand on whatever exposed material is on a stage, wall, or backdrop. And just, I don't ever say anything or do it, but like just a moment of like, thank you, please. Do you, props designer, production designer, set decorator, how do you like to couch the art that you make?
There's a lot of shows where I just do props, and then there's some times where I do props and I'll decorate the set, and it's just like kind of encompasses a few different things. There's some shows where we're building from scratch, where I, pretty much design the whole visual aspect of it. Yeah, it's just like takes one of those minds to be able to see the whole picture in your mind and explain it to people and tell them that's what they want. Even though a director is like, I don't know about that. And I'm like, you know what? Just try it. We'll work it out. And then 9 times out of 10, they end up going with it.
Carl Forsman, who's another great director, taught a semester of directing at the Atlantic in third year. And one of the pieces of advice that he gave us, and one of the things that he said was most helpful for him as a director working with actors, was if you couch your direction in the form of a question, either 3 things will happen. Either A, the actor will agree and try to take the note. They will try to reject it, or they'll say, oh, I hadn't thought of that before. But either way, what you can say is if you start to get any resistance, he says, what do you think about, do you think that the character would do this? And if it's I don't think so, or no, I'm not sure, he always just says, well, let's go back and let's try it this way one time and see how it works. And more often than not, like you said, that's the direction that it was supposed to go, or that's the way it was supposed to be. And he said it's a really great way to bring your actors in and bring them along for the process and make them feel like they are a part of it, that you're creating something together as opposed to you being the one in the room just telling people.
Particularly if you have a difficult actor, couching stuff in the thing of like, that was so good. Like, I'll be honest, I think I have this weird idea. I think it's probably really stupid, but that was so, like, we basically know what the scene is now. Like, just for fun, would you like see what happens if we do this? It's probably gonna be god awful. And 9 times out of 10, then they'll think it's their idea.
Actor friends, I'm going to give you a piece of advice. Don't piss off your props master.
Word.
Or your costume designer, or your set designer,
or your
stage manager.
Basically, anybody whose job it is to make sure that you can do your job more effectively, stay on their good side.
Yeah.
There was this show I did a few years ago. Ooh, should I say? I'm not going to say any names or titles just because. Yeah, just because.
That's probably safer for us too. In terms
of
like,
I was dealing with a very difficult lead actor who thought he was awesome, but let's face it, he wasn't. And he had to drink a lot of wine in the show. So after numerous times of asking him to be more professional, having stage manager and director get involved, and he still wouldn't quit, the last show, I replaced his grape juice with prune juice. That happened. It's so unprofessional, but you know what? He deserved it, and everyone backed me up. The stage manager was like, that was awesome. I can't believe you did that.
What was he doing that was so...
He was being extremely aggressive, unprofessional, not a team player, basically telling me how to do my job when he didn't even know how to do his.
If you get paid to play professionally, be nice to the people who are giving you the playground.
Yeah.
I love that.
Because I will grease those monkey bars.
And Dan and I will be there and laugh just like that, over and over at your pain.
And also, it costs you. I was talking about this with a friend of mine recently, because we were talking about how insular and how small the theater world is and the entertainment industry is. And you never know who knows anybody.
Exactly.
And it costs you nothing to be kind.
I won't say it costs you nothing to be kind, because I have had experiences where it is extraordinarily hard to be kind because you know the work you're doing is terrible. You're being asked to do things that are bad artistically. The people around you are yes-manning. Like, it can be very, very hard to be kind.
We've all been there.
I think sometimes it can be easy to be kind, but I think particularly in this business, it can be excruciatingly hard to be kind. But I think that what happens if you take that shortcut, if you are in the right, what it can potentially cost you to be right for that second is not worth the effort of weeks of pain to make other people's lives more pleasant. Because probably there's a lot of people who feel just like you do, but you will make their life miserable and you'll exacerbate the situation. I
mean, especially in indie theater, because, you know, in addition to doing props, I also produce. And that means I'm in the casting room and I have a voice. And I've had to use that before. And it's just like, yeah, I worked with that person on that thing that one time and it did not go well. Do I want to do it again because he's really talented? Or she? No. Done.
Comedy Central has a series called "This Is Not Happening." Have y'all ever heard it?
I love it.
It's one of my favorite things to watch on YouTube. I love it now. But one of the comedians on that show, Roy Wood Jr., was telling a story about how he was doing a taping of National Star Search back when that got a reboot, and he bombed in the semifinal round, and a couple of the celebrity judges were not kind about it. And he had a moment on stage in the middle of this live broadcast where he was going to react negatively, but the host of the show, Arsenio Hall, saw what was happening and physically stopped him very subtly on stage and stopped him from reacting. And afterward, he pulled him aside backstage, and Roy Wood Jr. credits this conversation with Arsenio Hall as saving his career. It's something that he's never forgot, where Arsenio Hall says to him, "People will forget a bad show. They will never forget a bad attitude."
That's, yes.
Oh my God, that is the thing.
That's the thing. People will forget a bad show, but they will never forget a bad attitude. And I heard that, and I immediately made a mental note. File that away.
Yeah.
Just file that away. Yeah. Put it somewhere where it's instantly accessible in your brain.
So I feel that way, right? But then kind of going back to the stay in your lane conversation earlier, I was once in a show with a director who is very successful, who I respect quite a lot. That aside, I was watching actors around me, and sometimes I felt like they were being abused. And there was an instance where in this particular production, there was an actor who identified as female and had recently had a child and was playing a character who is a mother in the play. And the director, who does not identify as female, was trying to tell this female identifying actor what it was like to carry a child. And
God.
Obviously, not only would it be disrespectful as an actor in that process to speak out against the director, it's also definitely not in my lane as a cis male actor in that room. But I can't tell you not only how much I wanted to speak out, how much when I saw that actor was disturbed by it afterwards, I felt terrible for not speaking out. I still to this day think, frankly, I should have stood up and been like, "I'm sorry, that's unacceptable."
Who was the equity deputy?
Someone who had the exact same reaction I did. Like the exact same reaction and stayed seated.
Your ultimate instinct and choice of action to not say anything in the moment, I think in a weird way that was, I don't want to say correct, but I think that was the right intention, because I feel like hearing that the smart way or the more effective way to handle that conflict is afterward to find that female identifying actor and say, "This moment felt a little weird to me. This felt inappropriate. I wanted to check in with you. How are you doing? Do you want anybody to say anything on your behalf? Do you want to say anything?" Because that felt weird to me. I think the impulse to say something on that person's behalf is well intentioned, but I think the most effective way to go about it is first to check in with the person who is directly involved and then find out if there is something specifically that they want to do and then formulate a way forward from there.
Sarah, I'm interested to know if you have a point of view on that experience.
I am weird sometimes, and like I will not speak up even though I know I 100% should, and it's just like it stems from like a childhood wound where I talked too much in class and got reprimanded for it. So like as an adult, I don't speak up a lot. And yeah, I feel like a lot of people have that thing that they deal with. It's like a complex almost. I don't have a name for it. And I probably, it pains me to say this, but I probably would have just sat there, even though I would have completely felt totally, empathetic towards the person who was being offended. But I'm just like, what do I do? Like, I don't want to be that jerkhole that's like, we shouldn't be talking about this. This is weird. But then at the same time, it's like, it's just as bad if you just sit there and do nothing.
That's a question that I think this show should continue to address. In brief, all I will say to that is, luckily this was a wonderful company, so exactly what you described did happen as soon as she went off stage. There were 6 of us that kind of just went and didn't really even say anything, just like sat with that kind of like, we all saw the same thing, right? No one really needed to speak, and she spoke, and then a conversation was had. But I would say in the briefest terms, my complication to what you said is, in the power dynamics of this industry, if there was a pause in between, the director might think that she asked someone to speak so that it wouldn't seem like it was coming from her. Because yes, I agree with you in principle. However, I think sometimes when these dynamics are at play, which obviously is so much of the conversation now, one of the things I feel like we haven't yet addressed that's come up tonight a couple times, thank God we are dealing with the sexual implications, not necessarily the gender-based implications, pretty well now, at least from what I'm experiencing versus 4 years ago. But I feel like the other forms of abuse that happen in the inherent power structures in theater have not changed at all. And I feel no more empowered as an actor to speak up on someone else's behalf, even through the correct channels, because I don't think it'll go any further than it would have gone 5 years ago. And that's, to me, that's the bigger question of like, yes, that's the right thing, but there are so many power dynamics at play that suppress that dissonant voice to the director's pristine authority, that it often gets squelched or worse, comes back to make an actor seem like a problem, even when they went through the right channels.
Do you think that has anything to do with the fact that theater is an art form which is based on being traditional? And even though we're living in like modern day with all this technology and everything, there's still some things we do that haven't changed in hundreds of years. And like the hierarchy aspect is one of them.
No, the hierarchy thing is one of the things that we invented just 100 years ago. Directors didn't exist until Russia in the late 19th century.
I did not know that.
Yeah, that's why Rude Grooms does what we do. Like,
right.
That's like this whole regimented authority system that we're so beholden to, which I so agree with you about. That is very recent, and yet we're so...
They're like, oh my God, we
held down
gotta
by
keep this going. And it's like, why?
Right.
It just, I feel like it's more of a hindrance nowadays than anything. And I wonder if that has anything to do with like how we live in this modern society where we're just like free and open with each other, because like the internet and social media has made us feel like we're allowed to say whatever we want whenever we want, which is fine in some respects and not fine in others. And if that is just spilling over into this pool where you step into a theater, and if you're doing a Shakespeare, you just like automatically transported to like the 1500s. It's just like, I feel like we're still towing the line between traditional and modern way of doing things, where you think it would be more evolved than it has been, but it hasn't.
Before we get into the end of the show, Sarah, you just hinted at the fact that you have shifted from making props into producing as well.
Yeah.
And I'm interested into how that happened.
And
if there are any parallels that you see in those, because I feel like there are obviously a lot of directors who've become producers. There are a lot of writers who have become producers. There are even a lot of actors who've become producers. But I feel like it's much rarer that you hear of a costume set or properties designer shifting into that sphere. And I'm interested to hear what that dynamic is like for you and if there are any overlaps.
So how I got into it was I had become resident with Retro Productions, and fearless leader, artistic producing director Heather Cunningham kind of took me under her wing because we have very similar styles in which we do things. She's very like all about the details. She's a phenomenal actor as well. It's just like how she runs her company. It's just very regimented, but in a good way. And I don't know how or when this came about, but I said, I'm kind of interested in producing. And so she let me like shadow on like a show or two. And she's like, this is what I do. This is how I do it. And I also have a background in graphic design, and I had started to dabble in doing their marketing, which I do now. Next thing I know, I'm just like one of the producers of Retro Productions. And, you know, I'm like doing casting calls, helping out with casting, fundraising, marketing, you name it. What's interesting is when I'm doing a show, I'm doing props and producing. It's this weird polarity where I'm the lowest man and the highest man on the totem pole. No one cares about the prop designer. A lot of people don't even know I'm there. And that's fine. I get it. I'm not supposed to be known. I'm just supposed to make things happen and they magically show up. But at the same time, I know. At the same time, I'm also have a producer hat where, you know, I have to step in and be a person of authority when Heather is being actor person, not producer person. And then I become producer person. And it's sort of like a lot of hat shifting going on. And I definitely found a voice as a producer. I don't know where or how, but I have heard that I can be intimidating for my small stature. And I don't know if it's my confidence. I've always been that way. And I don't know why that is. And I've heard that from many different aspects, and maybe someone can shed some light on it. It's just like being very detail-oriented and organized and just making sure that things go the way they should. And yeah, that also helped me burn out rather quickly.
Are you OCD in your personal life?
Yes. 100%. I spike my furniture so that if it gets moved, I know exactly with spike tape. Yeah, I do that. So I know exactly where it goes in my house. Does
your personal spike tape glow in the dark?
No.
Well, I know what I'm getting you for next Christmas.
I use it to my advantage. But like, you know, as a props person, sometimes that, you know, people say like, that's just crazy. When I ask them, they're like, oh, can you not use that pen that came out of your bag and use the pen that I gave you because it looks the way I want it to look, and they don't understand that.
But I think that is, to borrow an old phrase, I think that's the difference that makes the difference. I think that there is something to be said about requiring specificity in your work. And I think the projects or the pieces of art in whatever medium, I think always benefit from that kind of specificity.
And this constant strive for perfection is why I am able to do the work that I do, because not everyone would have that level of perfection, you know?
The things you notice, the actors don't even notice in what you've given them, like you said.
Yeah, like there was a couple tech rehearsals on a show I did where I was just sitting in the corner carving down pencils and biting them because the actor was playing it very nervous, and I wanted his pencils in the play to like look like he'd been chewing on them for weeks. That happened. That was real.
Holy.
That's amazing.
Wow.
I know.
Okay.
And here's the thing. A lot of people have asked, why don't you do Broadway? Because they don't let you do that.
Fascinating.
That's why I don't do Broadway. Could I, if I had taken the steps to get a show on, you know, in the Union on Broadway, I probably could do it.
Yeah.
But they don't let you bite pencils during tech rehearsals because they don't care. You're not going to see it. That's the thing.
Right.
In indie theater, the spaces are so small and intimate that's like, you do notice those details. Yes, in proof, I wrote out all the notebooks with real math equations because the way they were playing it, he was 5 feet from the front row. They're going to see it. There's no way I'm putting gibberish in those notebooks.
Right.
It took me forever, but it was worth it. And that the actor, he kept them. He kept them, which was a lot of my props get taken away because they want to keep them, and that's great.
One of the people who has taken your props sitting right here at this table.
One of the reasons we're such kindreds. When I was doing I actually probably learned this from you, but it was like 5 years after we started working together. I did a play about John Wilkes Booth called Booth, and we had Booth's journal in it. And the playwright, who's one of my best friends, named Stephen Walters, was like, so we got to get like writing in this book. Do you want to do it? And I was like, yes, I do. And so I took it, and I went and found a couple of examples of his handwriting, learned how to do his signature perfectly, then went to my copy of all of his writing and wrote every single bit of it in as close to his handwriting as I could do in this book.
That's how you do it.
It's the most Daniel Day-Lewis I've ever been, but man, it was fun. And it meant so much when I would open it up and like see a page that had come out through my like physical objects for some reason. Really
it makes a difference.
Yeah.
Like when we did the Aaron Burr play, remember we found a bunch of his letters online, and then I had taken them and I actually wrote out the letters that he had written, and those appeared. I don't know if we ever saw them, but they were there, and I felt like that meant something to the production. The fact that his actual letters that I rewrote on the paper that I made were there.
Well, and Jessica Renee Russell in particular, who was the protagonist of the play, who discovers this like trunk of love letters that he's written to other women. Not only was there no way to predict in which way hundreds of letters would fall out of a trunk, but then you would have no idea like what area of stage she would be on to rip open a letter to do a moment.
Because it was in a different spot every night.
Yeah. And it gave her the freedom to do such explosive, honest work. Because, to
actually live the moment, not act the moment.
Yeah.
And I feel like that makes a difference in terms of performance. When you don't have to worry about, is this book blank? Oh my God, it's blank. What do I do? But if I'm working on the show, don't worry about it.
The book is never going to be blank.
I never put blank paper on stage, ever.
Which is why you're burnt out.
Which is why you're burnt out.
Which is why I'm burnt out.
Which is why, if you're listening to this podcast and you're hiring Sara Slagle for your next project, give her money for a team. Give her money for a team. Here's the thing. Uh-oh.
I don't know if I would accept it.
Really?
Yeah, that's the OCD perfectionist part of me, where it's not so much a control freak thing. It's just like I feel like I would not be able to explain my process to someone else and have it come out the way I want it to come out. I'm like a one-woman show.
How do you think? I mean, knowing that about yourself, knowing that led you to burnout, do you have any... Have you thought about any ways in which you will shift the way that you work if and when you come back to the industry?
I haven't thought that far yet. I haven't fished enough yet to know what that answer is.
Well, I guess that means we'll need to have Sara Slagle back for a part 2.
For part 2.
Part 2.
Yeah.
After I hit the Beaverkill River, I'll let you know.
There it is.
Awesome. Beaverkill. We're putting it on the calendar. What day is that?
April.
Great. Awesome. We'll see you at the end of April. This week on Twitter, Cynthia Silver, who is at CYN_Silver, says, "A dose of Zen, courtesy of @RudeGrooms and my brilliant friend, brackets, Anya Safford." She didn't write the brackets. Those are my brackets, because Anya is a brilliant, brilliant dose of Zen. Thank you so much, Cynthia. We love you. We got to get you on this show.
Yes.
Because you are also beyond brilliant.
I've talked about it before. Cynthia Silver is the reason that I took a 3rd year at Atlantic.
Whoa.
Yeah.
Well, I want to learn more about that when Cynthia is sitting right here at this wood know.
Yep.
So challenge is dished to you, my friend.
She should also, Cynthia, if you're listening to this, when you come on the episode, bring Sadie. Have you met Cynthia's daughter, Sadie?
I haven't met Sadie.
They are cool.
I've seen many a beautiful photo.
Sadie is cooler than all of us.
I'm not surprised.
Yeah.
Daniel, it's been a couple weeks, but I have been asked multiple times by a friend of ours, Amber Elby, what'd you think of George Lucas in Love?
I loved it.
And have you seen Bubba Hotep?
I've not seen Bubba Hotep. Amber asked me this question on Twitter. I've not seen Bubba Hotep. I thought that George Lucas in Love was great. There was, I think in the initial watching, there was one thing. Yeah, the Yoda impression was a little too ham-handed. That was just a little, I was like, especially because everything else was so subtle, and the Yoda bit was a little forced. And I was like, okay, well, it's hard to fit Yoda in there anyway, but sure. If that's what you could do, that's what you could do.
I look forward to growing old with you, Daniel Kemper. Also this week, Mandy Kulega, who is at the _Mandy, MANDEE bird on Instagram, posted "Okay Good Coffee" on the Anya episode, which basically sums up my experience of listening to that again this morning for the 4th time, because Anya is the Yoda I need in my life.
Just settle into that episode with a good cup of coffee and like be ready to just chill out. I really did love that conversation so much. Oh my God.
Should we listen to it again right now?
No, because we have to watch Jojo Rabbit after this.
And finally this week, Roger Lipson, who is at Roger_Lipson, LIPSON on Instagram, says, "The interview was brilliant. Thank you for posting." Well, thank you for listening, Roger, and for sharing those thoughts. I agree. Anya's brilliant.
Yeah, Anya makes us all look good by association.
Yeah.
Those are facts.
Those are absolute facts.
Yep. So Rachel Purcell on Instagram at Rachel Percy. She said, "Oh, thank goodness, because I'm officially out of this wooden episodes to listen to." She binged all of our episodes in a couple of weeks. and says, I can't tell you how much I've been enjoying the binge. I'm fairly new to podcasts and only started listening to anything when I started regularly walking a dog, so I'm still kind of finding my podcast groove, but your show is great. She says, in response to the Anya conversation, I really did enjoy it. I love this religiosity idea, parentheses, all too descriptive, and made me think about something Raul Esparza said at a live interview I went to. He was talking about being brought up in a very Cuban Catholic environment and went on to talk about how people go to church for the same reason they go to the theater, to communally experience emotion and connection. Also really made me want to brush up on my Chekhov. I feel like I've missed that in not really having formal training. So anyway, I think the action item here is you should probably have Raul Esparza on This Would Know, which I wholeheartedly agree with.
And have Anya teach a Chekhov class for working professionals.
Correct.
I think that's a twofold recommendation right there.
So we've officially sent out formal invitations to Raul Esparza and LeVar Burton.
Hashtag this Burton no.
Yep. Hashtag this Burton no.
And Aisling B.
And Aisling B.
Our first invitation.
Our first invitation was to Aisling B. That is correct.
So thank you again to everyone who responded to last week's episode. If you have thoughts on this week's episode, please go ahead and tweet at us, Insta at us, or better yet, record some audio and email it to thiswouldknow@rudegrooms.com. For our Patreon supporters, they've actually already heard our first audio submission emailed to that email address from Amber Elby. That's in response to what's going to be episode 11 with Deb Radloff. That episode is already available to watch an archival live stream of on Patreon. And so those who are listening to the most recent recording with Jenny Stewart, the Associate Artistic Director of Shakespeare Dallas, they are able to listen to Amber's recording and see our first response to it. So recommendations. Got anything, Daniel?
I do. This recommendation is coming, it's a little bit of an older book, but I'm rereading it because I'm getting ready to read the third installment of the series. This week, I am going to recommend John Dies at the End by David Wong. David Wong is the pen name of Jason Pargin, formerly a writer for Cracked.com. He wrote a series of books, the first one being titled John Dies at the End, the second one being titled This Book is Full of Spiders, Seriously Don't Touch It, and the third one, which I'm getting ready to read, entitled What the Hell Did I Just Read? A Novel of Cosmic Horror. These are really weird, darkly comedic sci-fi novels about alien invasions and parasitic life form that takes on the form of soy sauce that gives you hyperintelligence along with a whole lot of other darker implications. And the first installment is hilarious. I'm like skimming through the first two books to sort of catch myself up on what's been happening in the series before I crack open the third one for the first time. So if you want to read along with me, John Dies at the End, This Book is Full of Spiders, and What the Hell Did I Just Read by David Wong.
Cool. This week, I'm going to recommend another Apple TV Plus show in case you got Apple TV Plus to watch Dickinson. If you haven't, you must. It's so good. And I'm going to recommend a show that when I first saw it, I wasn't sure if I was going to be able to recommend because I was on the fence about it. The Morning Show. Over the course of its 10 episodes, it becomes some of the most daring, bold, wrenching, painful, complicated, human, and entertaining television that I've ever seen. Gugu Mbatha Raw. I don't want to spoil too much about the show, but gives a performance that I think might be the most heart-wrenching thing I've ever seen on a television performance. I'm a huge, huge fan of her work ever since I first saw her in a play called Nell Gwyn at the Globe back in 2015, which is also like maybe my favorite thing I've ever seen on stage. She's a powerhouse, and her work in this show is incredible, but so is everyone. I know that it's kind of a controversial pick, but by the time the first season reached its end, I have been fully won over, and it's still leaving me thinking and leaving me really inspired by the performances.
If you want to find more and stay up to date with everything that Sara is doing in the world, you can find her on the internet machine on Instagram at A2Z, spelled phonetically, so that is EHTOOZEE.
Sara, where does that come from?
I have a tattoo that says A to Z.
What does it mean?
It goes back to like my typographical nerd roots, and it's just basically like from one extreme to the other.
Oh, I love
and everything in between.
that.
Yeah.
So fitting.
How long have you had that tattoo?
Oof, I got this when I first moved to New York, so like 13, 14 years.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
I know. And once you know the story and you're like, that's so fitting for you.
Yeah.
'Cause it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, there you have it.
Wholeheartedly agree.
Follower, get the tattoo.
Yeah.
Get the tattoo. Start a cult.
We'll beat it to 2 at 20 to 2. Rather to
And good night.
That's 2 glasses of wine in, and I still hit all them T's. I'm just saying. I am Monty. You can follow me on Twitter or Instagram. On Twitter, I'm at Montgomery Sutto. On Instagram, I am at Montgomery Sutton.
I'm Daniel Kemper. You can find me on Twitter and Instagram at the Daniel Kemper.
And if you enjoyed what you listened to, please subscribe, rate, etc., etc. And we look forward to being with you again next Monday.
Thanks so much for listening, guys. We'll see you next week.
Bottoms up. Oh, wait, but that's not actually the end anymore because we're going to do it. Great. Well, we'll just cut after what you said.
Yeah.
So what I
Yeah.
said is fine.
Yeah.
Bottoms up anyway. Well, I'm not going to bottoms up. That's too much wine.
That is way too much wine.
Thank you for listening to this week's episode of This Wouldn't Know, hosted and produced by Daniel Kemper and Montgomery Sutton. Original music is by Kara Arena. This Wouldn't Know is brought to you by Rude Grooms, a Queens, New York-based theater company creating epically intimate theatrical experiences in public spaces, non-traditional venues, and new media. Learn more at rudegrooms.com or follow us on social media at Rude Grooms and at This Wouldn't Know.